Newsfirst, face to face with Mariam Gunvujaya.
A very good evening. You're watching yet another edition of the Face to Face on TV1, where we dive deeper into Sri Lanka's political arena. I'm Mariam Gunvujaya, and our guest this evening is an executive committee member of the National People's Power, Chathuranga Abeysinghe. Very good evening, Chathuranga, and welcome on the show.
Good evening, and thank you.
Right, I feel like the talk of the town these days is the NPP visit to India. Everybody has been talking about it. There's so many opinions going around.
Right.
So to start off, would you like to tell us how this invitation actually came in?
Yeah, so basically the political change that we wanted to make, the strategies we laid out has been for 2 years, right? For the last 2 years, we have been organizing the ground, doing our political campaigns across educating people. At the same time, we know that we were working for a strategy, the international ties, right? For if you look at last 1 year, we met almost all the delegates, embassy heads in Sri Lanka, in main countries. And so India, probably we would have met 2 to 3 times. And very recently there was an official invite from the government of India for NPP to visit. So in order to improve our ties, bilateral, the diplomatic ties, because our party never had that kind of a interest or a invite officially, so we prepared for it. Team decided to go. 2 objectives. One was the increasing the diplomatic ties and the understanding what India and in their strategies and what they think about Sri Lanka, and the other piece is about how to understand the industrial growth that India has taken place. So that was the second objective. And so the 5-day visit was predominantly, first day in Delhi was on the diplomatic mission, and then other 3 days mostly on the industrial visits to understand what they've done differently to get a enormous growth in the world, economic growth. I mean, India would have struggled in the development side, but from economic growth perspective, they have done a tremendous job. So NPP's visit, not only under this Anayaka, there were 3 more joined this delegation, and they wanted to understand the other good things that we can learn from India. So those are the 2 objectives. So when it comes to why they invited, we feel that it's what we've been doing. And we have a very strong probability of winning the next election. I think that probably is why they invited us, to understand what we want to do, our policies, and also to know our leader more better.
So now the government of Sri Lanka is anyways working with India.
Yeah.
But for an opposition party, the National People's Power, to visit India and have talks with the External Affairs Minister, their National Security Advisor, and even the private sector, what do you think is NPP's position when it comes to Sri Lanka-India ties?
So not only India, Sri Lanka. Now how we see is that the world has superpowers, right? So the US, the Chinas, the Russias, the Indians are superpowers, and we are a very tiny nation that now even bankrupt, right?
Okay.
So in terms of in order for Sri Lanka to navigate, we as NPP believe that we need to have an unaligned policy.
But what's different? How is your position different from the other major political parties in the country?
So far, if you take the Rajapaksa regimes, they were more aligned to China, right? And it was very much discussed like that. And there were certain times in the history Sri Lanka was more aligned to India, or sometimes that we bypassed India and went. And there were a lot of repercussions around it. So our the foreign policy is very much clear in terms of the non-aligned policy, but we are very much in understanding that Sri Lanka is in the Indian economic zone. So that sense, India is very important for us in terms of accessing that huge market that's going to grow, and also historical ties that we had. So, and the Indian strategy of economic growth also covers the region. So therefore, for our economic ties, India is a very key player in our next phase of the country. And even with China and other countries, we would work on merit. on our national policy that NPP has.
But you mentioned concerns about development when it comes to India's economic growth and then development perspective. So how do you all view Sri Lanka's position when it comes to India's development? And I mean, there are always concerns about potential over-dependence also.
Yeah.
How do you all deal with that issue?
So when it comes to the bilateral ties and how we deal with India, always we need to look at the benefits that we can get from that side, and also to ensure that our sovereignty is safeguarded, right? So there are certain, I mean, if you really take the technology that they have gathered and also the access to their market. Now, for example, we've historically gone into a free trade agreement with India, right? But now it looks like it's one-way street. Right? We bring so much of stuff and we send little. So it's not about the agreement itself and whether we really thrive the policy that we wanted to run. So when it comes to this big powerhouse of the market and the technology that they've acquired, we feel that there's a mutual play and there's a mutual beneficial growth that we can take alongside India, but we can't overshadow our sovereignty in terms of security and the energy sector, especially on the renewable energy. So we need to ensure that the Sri Lankan people has the better benefits of all these deals that we would like to work with India. So because India has shown interest in certain areas, but I don't think we don't think India has a big interest in our market. Our market is so small. So but strategically, when it comes to how to utilize the Trinco base, how do we work on certain ties in terms of our industrial relations, and so those are the things that's been discussion in negotiation for the longest time. I think our focus will be on the industrial growth, whereas historically the political parties mostly used India for gaining certain votes based on the conflicts that we had.
Now, when you speak of the Indian Ocean region and the exclusive economic zone, there is a lot of concerns about geopolitical rivalries because of our ties, of our close ties with India itself. So even recently, I'm sure you've heard about the whole Indian Navy submarine in Sri Lankan waters in the Colombo port, and then the Chinese ship denied clearance, and then the Chinese ship going towards Maldives. Now, when it comes to India's role in regional issues and national security, what is the NPP stance? What do you all think is going on?
So basically, the India and the Indian Oceans, that whole piece of the Indian economic zone and their security concerns, this is not new. All our governments have dealt with it, right?
Okay.
So basically, whoever comes to power, we have to deal with it. At the same time, we all need to understand China also has an interest in Sri Lanka. That is because of their One Road, One Belt initiative, right?
Yeah.
So without bypassing Sri Lanka, that initiative won't work. So and also China also has now invested in our port city. So there needs to be a balanced view in that. That is why we feel that Sri Lanka needs to have a economic policy and a strategy for us.
Okay.
We never had that. We just kind of play to this side, play to that side. So
the government is doing it wrong.
So currently, I don't think we have a policy. I mean, if you ask any of the country, what are we going to produce? What are the products that we are going to produce in next 10 years? What is the technology we are going to bring in? How are we going to develop the rural areas? How do we improve our SME sector? What industries that will promote? If you ask, nobody has a clue, right? Industries run on their own. The government works on their own in terms of the getting the political vote or something like that. Historically, we didn't had that industrial plan. Now that is why we are with 12 billion exports and 20 billion imports, right? Whereas the other countries like the South Koreas, the Vietnams and the Indonesias are growing so fast because we never had a growth plan for us. And it was not visible for the last 20 years. So what we believe is that when we have that very much clear, that is a recovery plan for Sri Lanka, we'll have to work with India to make it happen. Will have to work with China to make it happen. Both parties are now equally important because two things. One is they've already given us debt, right? So they are our bilateral partners in development. And both parties have interest on Sri Lanka for certain reasons, right? So we need to ensure that we navigate this. It's not that we will align to either of the sides. So as soon as Sri Lanka has a very clear strategy, I think there will be support.
But Chathuranga, we have a president who is having bilateral talks with, diplomats and delegates from other countries quite often. Even right now, our president is in Australia,
yeah.
at a conference.
Yeah.
So why do you think he's lacking a plan like this?
So,
what's the reason?
I mean, we have not seen Ranil Wickremesinghe having a plan for the last 47 years of his journey, right? Now he is a president now who's trying to navigate a power problem in terms of ensuring that that he gains another term in the presidential post, rather than giving us a plan how to come out of this country. So when you say whether he has a plan or not, I mean, all the industries today going down in terms of manufacturing, right? And our SME sector is falling down, and there's 1,100 SMEs now going under Parate execution, and our education and health has gone down so drastically, right? But Ranil Wickremesinghe as a single person and no mandate from people, and the mandate that the previous government got, people throw them out, right? But still he is using that 134 seats in the parliament. And basically these neoliberal strategies that he is trying to create is not going to take us out of this hole. Now I'll give you a very simple example. Now what we need to do now is that we need to manage the debt. At the same time we need to improve our exports and substitute our imports. To do that we need a policy that supports our industries. But Sri Lanka now has become the highest cost of energy, right? It's 3 times in South Asia. Now would the foreign direct investments come to Sri Lanka? The secret of foreign direct investments going to countries is 4 things. One is energy, one is transportation, other one is telecommunication, and also cost of capital. Now those 4, what is the strategy Ranil is implementing today to support the industry? All the industries that are running today are becoming expensive and becoming less competitive in the market, right? So he basically believes that by liberalizing everything, that his neoliberal agenda of state moving out of the market and liberalizing everything, and it will auto create wealth. It has not happened anywhere in the world. We are also one of the countries, there are 50 countries, Mariam, who's in this debt crisis in the world. Right, they've taken commercial loans like the ISBs, high interest, and they have got into vicious cycles. Now Sri Lanka is among them, right? And funnily, it was Ranil Wickremesinghe and Harsha De Silva who went and brought 10 billion of ISBs in 2015. Now we are in that trap, right? Whoever the countries that came out of that had their national plan. Even the reason that we need to study India has a super plan, right? They know in 2020-30 what industries they need to get in, and the government ensures those industries get capital. The government ensures they are, now look at, now why does the Adanis and Ambanis are investing in other parts of the world? Because their government is so keen about it. But what about the other industries who won the world? When did our presidents and went and promoted those industries? Now we send about 100 articles to the world, earning 12 billion. Yes, that's of course, but again, all of these things that we send out to the world has potential. So what have our leaders done to ensure our investors, Sri Lankan investors, taking over the world? So this is the difference, right? So this neoliberal thinking Ranil has, he thinks when you liberalize the market and when you sit back in your chair and everything will fall in place. Such has not happened across the world. So all these developed nations or the fast growing nations, private sector drives the economy and government supports it, holding their hands. So there needs to be investment in technology, there needs to be support in the education to create the right workforce. Nothing is planned here. So he is just trying to win another term. So that's why I said they have been, the same class of people has been ruling for the past 30 years, did not had a plan. So our strategy now is to put that plan across, invite all our bilateral partners to see it, invite the IMF to see it, invite our invite the foreign investors and also the Sri Lankan community outside Sri Lanka to be part of it. That's why we are very clear to say the current governments or the even Ranil Wickremesinghe, neither the previous governments had no economic plan to bring Sri Lanka to where it should be.
But the NPP does. It has okay. So Chathuranga, okay, let's say you all have a policy framework that the current government or the previous government didn't have, and you all will implement it when you all come to power, if you all do so. But how now? I feel like one of the very big concerns among the people is that the governments are failing to ensure transparency. There's no accountability in the country. That's what everyone is talking about. While we acknowledge that there is one part of the country that says, you know, Ranil Wickremesinghe came into power without a people's mandate and all, we have another set of people who also say, you know what, he actually revived the economy. We're doing good. We're not in, you know, queues and all of that.
It's not that.
I mean, it's people's opinions. So does your party have a framework, like a plan as to how you all are going to ensure transparency and accountability?
So Mario, firstly Sri Lankans has to understand state and government is two different things. Now what we have mixed up is state and the government. That means now if you take state, it's Raj in Sinhala, right? So state has state services like the departments and all that need to be run state. Now government is a 5-year office that you get to drive policy. Right now in Sri Lanka, all these state institutes like the departments, the SOEs, who has controlled it so far? The minister, right? So our very clear, when we come into power, we will create this clear demarcation. The politicians are different, distinguished from the state. State has to be run by the secretaries. Departments has to be run by the secretaries, and there's independent services, public service commission, and there are ISOs who can run by directors, who can appoint on KPIs.
So what will the ministerial portfolio
So ministerial portfolio is to ensure that happens. There are guardrails and ensure that when the targets are given. So we need a performance budget in this country, right? We had budgets and they were never tracked on the performance of the outcomes. Say for example, I'll give you one. Say education. Now what was the target we had and where are we today? Nobody knows about it, right? But then all the ministers would say, I did this change, but no, it's the secretaries and the think tanks who does those things. So if you go to India, why do you meet the secretaries? Because state and government is separate. What happened in Sri Lanka is the politician influence the government sector. He influenced what the department should do in policy. He influenced whom to take into office and what positions to be given. He influenced how do you recruit and what not to recruit. The government officials or the politicians were the ones who decided what the length of the road or the size of the road. So NPP is very clear that we would ensure that there's a clear distinction between the government, the role of the politician, and also the public service. So if we can make this independent body, that is where that we could bring this transparency and all that. Now when it comes to this technological transformations which other countries have taken, now good example, we already visited the Indian the UIDA, that is Unique Identification Authority, right? So that is where we said that every individual have a unique digital ID so that everything that you do is traced, right? And India did that, right? And also like South Korea did that. So ensure that the technologically, digitally your government services are running. Why is it not happening in Sri Lanka?
If I recall right, I think they have told that they will do it.
So now how many years now, right? So South Korea did it in 1991, right? So what happens
is... So we are just lagging.
The reason is the politicians' personal interest. So every time you digitize something, it becomes transparent.
But Chathuranga, in the end of the day, they will be the ones who are overlooking anyways, even if the secretary does the job, even if the authorities do the job. You said the minister has to overlook the thing in the end of the day.
So minister has to be responsible, right? Now, if you are...
But don't you think they can manipulate it then?
No, because now there's one reason that how we distinguish, because we are a team. We are not individuals who came to politics. I work for a private company. I believed in the cause JVP is believing in, and I joined them, right? And we have a team that who's collectively responsible. Our minister will not work on his own. He will work on the policy. And he will, and we also have a team that will support the minister, that he will run on science and logic, right? Because none of us has technical capabilities, Mariam, to run ministries, right? We will have certain experiences, but you only need about management skills and good governance and lead by example. If the minister is doing that, then the rest of the structure will fall in place. In a private, why would we say private organizations are efficient and government organizations not efficient? Now, do you have any private organization in Sri Lanka who is successful? The board of directors are stealing. Do you have a private organization in Sri Lanka who doesn't run on KPIs? Do you have a private organization in Sri Lanka who keeps people who are incompetent? Right? So it's the leadership. Right? So as soon as you have the right leadership, this has happened in many countries, not in Sri Lanka. So when we feel that when NPP comes into power, our personal interest is out of the way already, right? So we do this politics voluntarily because we want to fix this country. And also each of us has a unique role and a collective responsibility. JVP has ensured over the past 60 years, if anybody has done something against the people, misusing public money and going against the norms, they have taken the person out. Secretary has the power. So even I go into office, and if I do something wrong, our secretary can take me out. Until you put those disciplines in, we can't change the system. So NPP is very clear. We don't have any of us as personal interest but a public interest, and we are collectively responsible for each other, looking after each other's shoulder. And one example for the people who are listening, now have you ever worked in a volunteer organization that where the leader is corrupt? Can you volunteer if your leader is misusing your energy? No. So this system that JVP has built is so good in that sense that the people who work for a cause, it automatically gives a control to the leadership, because leaders can't misuse that energy and the effort, right? So people will never work voluntarily afterwards. So even in a paid organization, you need a lot of controls to ensure that people are doing what they are supposed to do. So I think that is the biggest difference between NPP and other political parties which has come into power. This culture, we have to change this. We have to change this culture of self-interest over the public interest, and for that you need a collective power. That is why we have created a citizens organization. Not only the politicians are responsible, the people who are down in the different units we have, structures we created, district committees, the local councils, all those things, people will be collectively responsible. So that can give us assurance that we can do this change, especially on the state transparency. And
okay, so I just picked up a question real quick.
Yeah.
You drew several comparisons to private sector and public sector, and even about volunteers. Simply tell me, is NPP pro-privatization or against it? Because there were multiple concerns recently when it came to SLT especially.
Yeah.
So are you all pro-privatization or are you against it?
You can't, I think we need to agree that we can't ask that question in that way, because we are against privatization of certain sectors. Why? Because our industrialization and the economic growth plan needs those things. That's why I said in the first thing. So energy sector, we want government to play a substantial role. Right? Transportation, because it's a service, we want government to play a substantial role. And when it comes to banking, we want government to play a substantial role, right? So those things, we don't think private capital can give us the lowest possible cost in the country. Therefore, we feel, and especially on telecommunication also, that we feel these 4 areas government should play a substantial role. Others we can go for private public partnership, changing management to private management to ensure they are more efficient. So we are very clear with the global economic growth plans, and if you take the countries like India, South Korea, Vietnam, China, all these countries hold on to certain SOEs.
But you were the same person who said that if it's a public sector, they will lag, and private sector is always better than that.
It's currently, no?
Okay.
So currently,
so your government would change
because the leadership is corrupt. Now, why would Singapore Airlines or IOC run efficiently, being in state, right? Why would the other, like if you take Europe, almost all the countries, the Central Europe, the Norwegian and the Swedish, all these countries, including France, their energy sector is government. So then they should be also inefficient.
Okay.
Why would the other countries' SOEs become efficient? And that's the segregation of power I told you. Because if you appoint a board, you give them a KPI, you ask them to run. And if they don't run it, you take them off. There's enough rules and regulations in the state sector. You have the COPE, you have the COPA, you have the appointment boards and all those, Auditor General, everything is there. It's just that the politician is interfering in all those sectors. So if you
so politicians
separate it, no, it doesn't matter whether the ownership of that entity is public or private. It's a governance. Right?
Okay.
So as soon as you create the governance, it shouldn't matter whether it's public or private. And what we are saying is those 4 areas we are very concerned. Other things we can look at individually, and at the same time giving away the revenue generating entities is counterproductive to what we want to do, because we lack tax revenue, and some of the SO is now giving us revenue, and why would you give it away now, right? So there is another cause also at this point temporarily in this situation, but long term we feel those 4 areas government has to play a pivotal role. So it's not a yes or a no in privatization. World has done privatization, and all the developing nations have done privatization, and the growth countries are holding on to these 4 just to give competition.
Right. I just want to wrap up with one question for you.
Yeah.
The NPP was chosen as the most preferred candidate by a survey recently when it comes to the upcoming elections in the country. But I feel like from things that I've seen on social media that plays a very big role, there is much confusion when it comes to people with this particular trip that is now the talk of the town, quite literally, as I said when we started off. So do you think that this trip is playing a positive role when it comes to your party's position and view to the public?
Yeah, I think this probably is one of the most positive things that happened very recently, because there was, okay, I'll give you one. When we were 3%, people said you will never come to power, right?
Okay.
And when we were building and talking to people, and people are realizing, they said you will never get the majority, right? Now when when the polls are saying we are the majority, we will say that you don't have the skills, you don't have the international relations, look at how Ranil is going all over the place and making bilateral connections. And now to say that NPP going to meet India is a negative, no. It was the negative we had, that we don't have ties with the international community. People had concerns about us being fully aligned to China because the communist ruling and the party relations. But I think we will balance it off. Most of the ambassadors visited us very recently. The IMF visited us. So whatever is the negative that we had is becoming positive.
Now you're positive. Right. Okay. So that was the conversation we had with Executive Committee member of NPP, Chathuranga Abeysinghe tonight. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you for joining us, Chathuranga.
Thank you.
Good night and take care.
Thank you.
Newsfirst, face to face with Mariam